Peace, peace, peace. Shalom, shalom. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. And welcome to another day to labor in the vineyard of the Most High. With your brother. Another day to get in the Word. To see what the Most High got to serve. And what we eating on today. More of how it's going on in the heavens above is transforming the elements and the membranes in the lower heavens. Down here on the earth realm. Alright? So we starting to see how science and spirituality go hand in hand. We getting the spiritual science. Alright? Ain't no separation between the two. We combining them now through these teachings that we've been getting. And this lesson just gonna build upon the last few that we've been getting. And since we've been getting some good understanding here, let's keep on building this bridge here. Alright? Keep building this stairway to heaven. Alright? You can get some more clarification here. And I don't know about where y'all stay at, but I'm out in Virginia. And I don't see the chemtrails spraying as much as they used to. They didn't slow down out here. So the morning when I went to work, because I leave out like 5:30, it still be dark outside. And I always stare in the sky. And sometimes I get to see the so-called shooting stars, which are the chariots going back and forth through the portals and things up there. But today, when I was doing my observation, I seen more constellations than normal. More different star systems. Usually, it's only a few that's visible. The Big Dipper, Little Dipper, Orion, and maybe Pleiades. But every direction I turn, I can see more star systems. Alright, now that they ain't spraying the sky as much, it ain't as much fog up there, and it's a clearer view, especially when it's not cloudy outside. Alright, so it's just something I picked up on this morning, that it's nice. And a couple years ago, I went to Hawaii for a few weeks, and out there, I don't know whether the elevation of the land different or what, but all of the stars and the constellations look way closer to the earth. Alright? You can see all of them a whole lot closer and clearer. That was like the best view I ever had of the night sky. And even though the one I had this morning wasn't bad, it couldn't compare to that one. But at the same time, I could see a lot of those different constellations. It's just they were smaller versus in Hawaii. It was like they was all bigger. You can see them a whole lot clearer. Alright? There wasn't as much space in the sky because there was stars all over. But let's get into the Word. Let's get into the Word. We're going into the keys. We're going into the keys. Let's start off with the definition of the word. Let's get the definition of the word. And we only want the first two. Divine letters, lights, powers, and lives that make all levels of intelligence partakers of the divine nature of godliness, glory, and virtue. The second definition, that's the one we want. Divine thought transmission. Divine thought transmission between the prototype and copy of primal life in the creation of worlds. Alright? Just had to get the definition of the word right there right quick. Now let's go ahead and get to the main course. Hold on. I gotta find it. Page 131. Key 114. I'm gonna read the header. We are part of a larger vehicle which evolves into the next order of evolution, and a pillar of light, which establishes a light zone where life within cannot be absorbed into the destructive anti-verse. Alright? The backwards evolution that we going through down here. Alright? Let's start. Verse 1. Man functions as a thinking membrane between star systems, which govern star orbits of light, in the birth of new planetary systems within a river of crystal. Pause. Let's get the definition of river of crystal. We gotta make this thing clear. Break this science down into regular everyday language. River of crystal. The Milky Way galaxy into which the lords of light dip their thought forms. A stream of myriad star creations which has its own free path. With edges that can be conceived of as banks for planting a variety of life forms. Verse 2. At some point, the vehicle of man will begin to freely adapt through planetary migration into greater orbital relationships of the universal intelligence, operating through the many worlds of the atom cat mind, your pre-existing body of light. A time will soon come when man must enter a new galactic shell of the larger graviton spectrum. This happens when a solar civilization undergoes severe magnetic and gravitational changes upon entering an electromagnetic null zone in its immediate universe. Alright? And we are a solar civilization revolving around the collab, the central sun system. Remember we read about that in the last lesson. Alright? So we don't have a choice. You have to either elevate or get removed. And this all is tied to why the carnal mind is enmity against the Lord your God. Why those in the flesh cannot please their creator. About how the carnal mind is locked out from the presence of God, the presence of the light. Alright? Again, a time will soon come when man must enter a new galactic shell of the larger graviton spectrum. This happens when a solar civilization undergoes severe magnetic and gravitational changes upon entering an electromagnetic null zone in its immediate universe. Precept, page 169. Page 169, verse 7. There is presently occurring a space-time overlap with the higher evolution. There is presently, and this is what's going on right now at this time, there is presently occurring a space-time overlap with the higher evolution as the Earth's solar system enters an electromagnetic null zone, a vacuum area in space, which will change the magnetic forces of creation. All right, that's the definition of the electromagnetic null zone that we heading into. It's a vacuum area in space, which will change the magnetic forces of creation. All right, another precept. Go to page 124. Page 124, verse 20. Upon entering the lip of the electromagnetic null zone, the whole solar system will be picked up and reseeded in a different vibratory dimension of the galaxy. Upon entering the lip of the electromagnetic null zone, the whole solar system will be picked up and reseeded in a different vibratory dimension of the galaxy. The solar system will be projected off the lip of the electromagnetic null into a different system of harmonics, which will require fifth dimensional bodies. In the process, the incomplete body and mind, which is the carnal body and mind, shall lose its individualization, and the soul shall be reprocessed. Alright? So we see, it's not a choice right here. Either you gonna get up, you gonna choose to be chosen and get upgraded, repent, soften your heart, and come to the truth of the light, or you're not gonna be allowed to continue on, as the numbers on the planet are gonna keep dropping. Alright? The numbers is going down, farther and farther. There's a lot of things changing right now that the mainstream media is not reporting on. But it's happening. It's going down, whether people want to view it or not. The solar system will be projected off the lip of the electromagnetic null into a different system of harmonics, which will require fifth dimensional bodies. In the process, the incomplete body and mind shall lose its individualization, and the soul shall be reprocessed, like we read at the end of the last lesson. Those who are to represent the host of light in new electromagnetic spectrums shall maintain their physical form within a different envelope of light, so that they will be able to work with the advanced races of the Zoharim. Alright? So we see, you gonna get down or you gonna lay down, like Beanie Siegel said. Get down or lay down. You don't have a choice. You either gonna adapt and adjust, or you just gonna get kicked off of the earth. Back to page 131, verse 4. Enoch told me that at this time, the higher evolution will communicate knowledge to man to prepare him for an exodus. Pause. Can you see how now this separation is continuing even farther? Because only certain ones of us are receiving the codings to be coded. Alright? A lot of people then rejected it. This is even, I seen a video the other day of a brother burning the keys, talking about it's demonic. Negroes is crazy. Alright? That Negro gonna be lunch for Predator when he get here. And people think Predator ain't real. We done did lessons. The keys talk about the grotesque beings, meaning they ain't pretty. Alright? And they coming. Alright? They on the way. They gotta have some lunch waiting on them. And they gonna have a good selection between the 2/3 and these hard-hearted Negroes that think they Israel, but all Israel is not Israel. Oh, let's keep going. Enoch told me that at this time, the higher evolution will communicate knowledge to man to prepare him for an exodus, as his planet began to experience geophysical upheavals and the release of neutral matter from the core of the sun. These changes will also be timed with the release of neutral matter within the core of the earth, which has been the cause of cataclysms and catastrophic upheavals during previous geophysical cycles. Alright, like when Atlantis was destroyed, Lemuria was destroyed. To prevent complete destruction of the physical creation, the higher evolution mutually cooperating with spiritual man will reprogram man to go beyond his terrestrial earthly cubic function, measured in terms of orbital spin and what he feels to be a gravity constant. Verse 8. Enoch told me, man in this cubic space has always worked with the diminishing power. Speaking about in the space we in now, the consciousness time zone that we in now, right here during our time of probation. Enoch told me, man in this space has always worked with the diminishing power of the life recorder cell, which controls all adaptations of life. Let's get the definition of the recorder cell. The recorder cell, the system for storing thought forms by higher thinkers. The system for storing thought forms by higher thinkings. A hierarchy of knowledge. Pause. You always heard folks talking about the Akashic records, and they didn't access the Akashic records, but they don't even believe in the Most High and can't tell you nothing at all about spiritual things or the scriptures. But they say they didn't open up the Akashic records as they went into astral projection and all that mess, right? Oh, folks be lying. Folks just be lying. Ain't access nothing. The recorder cell, the system for storing thought forms by higher thinkers. Alright, we got our own cloud. Like you heard Google talking about how they record all this information on the cloud. No, all their technology is based off of abilities that we had. Alright, we got our own cloud. The Akashic records is true. We reading right here about it. The recorder cell. Alright? But you got to be in a certain mind space at a certain level of consciousness to access it. Alright? And if you don't believe in the Most High, and you don't know that you're a child of light, no, you're not going to get the privilege to access it. Just like the people that think they can open their third eye on their own. No, they fooling themselves. Alright? We read in the sealed portion about how Lucifer and his government can whisper deceiving thoughts to you the same way the righteous spirits can give you thoughts and suggestions and tell you can do this and that. Nah, them lying spirits, they be coming to Negroes all the time, getting them visions that are just false. The system for storing thought forms by higher thinkers, a hierarchy of knowledge. Through this system of elements, powers, matrices, etc., thoughts can be sufficiently combined in the materialization of energy, allowing for orderly guidance of the thought forms in the construction of reality. Alright? So again, Enoch told me, man in this space, this environment, his time of probation, has always worked with a diminishing power of the life recorder cell, which controls all adaptations of life. Therefore, he is in actuality not in a process of progressive evolution. Alright, we in retrograde. progressive evolution, where we were. Right now, we coming out of retrogressive or backwards evolution. Now we progressing forward, because evolution is spiritual. All right, all this technology and stuff that we done built in the carnal realm is not evolution. Evolution is spiritual, advancing back to the light. 9, he is degenerating from the original light. He is degenerating from the original light scenario of intelligence planted on this planet. And as his energy field is breaking down, he will require the pillar of spiritual light to attune his body to continue. The membrane of man will then be able to live within a higher wavelength of light, within a new age of light. Man is a light imprint. Man is a light imprint, now being harmonized through mirror-like projections emanating through prism faces of crystal. At a given point of planetary experimentation, the higher intelligence superimposes a higher energy model around the galaxy. 17. The key of Enoch is saying that we will go through negative entropy. Simultaneously, we will be taken by higher intelligence and moved into a new field of starseed evolution. Alright? So when it's saying negative entropy, if entropy is a measure of the capacity of a system to realize work, the increase in entropy in a process can be thought of as the system's loss of capacity for doing work. Alright? So the opposite of that would be the increase in the capacity for doing work. Alright? 18. This would take place by the pillar of light. Let's get the definition for pillar of light. Let's get the definition for pillar of light. Pillar of light, an infinite arrangement of light emissions which produce a given wavelength for projection and deliverance of the offspring of the deity. So the pillar of light produces a given wavelength for projection and deliverance of the offspring of the deity. The light is in itself a living consciousness controlled by divine thought forms which can neutralize destructive light channels. Photodissociation. It can also materialize levels of superior intelligence. Alright? And that comes from what we read a few minutes ago about the brotherhood working with spiritual man. They got the ability to help you overcome the negative aspects. Alright? That's why if you done made it this far to where you grasping these teachers, but you still battling with whatever lust is keeping you from purifying yourself to the level that your consciousness tell you need to go to, all you gotta do is ask them for assistance. They can help you fight these negative influences. Alright? You ain't nothing that's by yourself. Alright? If you're struggling to get rid of an addiction or something that's causing you to keep stumbling, all you gotta do is ask for assistance. Alright? And they will help your spirit man. They will help you to be able to battle against that frequency or that entity that's tempting you and causing you to stumble. But you also gonna have to show some willpower yourself. Ask them for strength. Alright? Ask them to take rid of the urges, the desires. Remove yourself from the people you're around that's helping you to become vulnerable to whatever it is that you struggle with. Alright? This will take place by the pillar of light which realigns our life space as we proceed into the next ordering of evolution. We will go towards the ultraviolet threshold through a pillar of light which penetrates all protective atmospheres and absorbs radiation. So that light is benign. Man is part of a larger crystalline vehicle which goes through a superimposed scale, not in the original physical matrix. Remember the lessons that we did on the overself. Man is part of a larger crystalline vehicle which goes through a superimposed scale, not in the original physical or carnal matrix. Thus, the regenerating program is implanted within our core lattice of crystal, encompassing the entire planetary field of human experience, while the other diminishing activities, not protected by the pillar of light, are allowed to completely dissipate. However, this complete realignment of the larger vehicle can take place only when the end of the cycle occurs. All right, and we at the end of the cycle now. We see all the signs that Yahshua told us to look for. This must come at the appropriate time, unless complete degeneration of the consciousness takes place, because the world has gone into such a state of perversion. All right, remember he said, time will be cut short for the sake of his elect. All right, because degeneration of the consciousness, the reprobate minds are increasing. All right, and you got to remember what we read in the last lesson about your intelligence or your consciousness carry over with you into your next life. All right, so all of these reprobate minds, they had this in them in a previous incarnation. All these sweet brothers that have popped up over the last 20 so years, because the Gentiles, they made it acceptable. No, they battled with that sin in a previous incarnation. Sodom and Gomorrah did not get kicked out of this time zone. Again, the Negroes, because it was not white folks. The Negroes that was in Sodom and Gomorrah, who their lust was burning for one and another. Male for male, female for female. No. They died in them sins, and that consciousness that they had carried over with them. And that's a sin that they're going to have to overcome in another incarnation. And if you don't overcome it then, you got to do it again. That sin don't just disappear. No, you got to conquer that lust. And the Gentiles got people thinking, along with these false religions and false preachers and teachers saying that it's okay. God made you how you is. No, that ain't how it works. You got to repent. Or you just not going to be allowed into the kingdom. You're going to go back onto another earth, and you're going to have to do it all over again until you purify your spirit man. No. The Most High said he gave them over to their burning lust because they had a reprobate mind that didn't have no desire for the things of God. And there are some people now that got a reprobate mind that think that they still getting the truth for the teachings, but their mind is distorted. The generation of consciousness, the 2/3, the gang, all them gang Negroes, that's the generation of consciousness too. All right, there's a whole lot of degeneration of consciousness going on at that time. All them people that want to alter their body to look like the image of the beast that's been put on the TV. No, that's a degenerated, reprobate mind of fallen consciousness. People gotta repent. They don't understand. As you keep going farther The only way for you to keep growing and getting coded from on high, you got to be able to understand the basic things. Like Jesus said, if you don't listen to the teachings of Moses, how you gonna listen to what I tell you? You can't. You're not gonna be able to advance. If Moses told you this was wrong, Jesus still said that same thing was wrong. No. Repent. That's how you cleanse your spirit. And then you can try to grow on from there. Hatred. If you got hatred in your heart, you still walking around hating white folks. No, that's a degeneration of consciousness, because your heart chakra is not going to open up. And when you hate white folks and you think the white man is the devil, your view of the scriptures is distorted. Because when you see things that got to deal with the devil, you automatically think of white folks. You thinking of a man instead of a spirit. That's a degenerative consciousness. That's a reprobate mind right there. You don't see spiritual things. You see carnal things. And that hatred is blocking your vision. Alright? We ain't supposed to hate nobody. Alright? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. 22. This transition into new astronomical and consciousness spaces is known as a space-time overlap. All right, let's get the definition. Space-time overlap. The overlap, meaning the coming together of different levels of intelligence with their respective consciousness domains in the greater universe. Higher intelligence can move through space between three-dimensional sets into coordination with intelligence of any other space-time set. The means through which our human race, which this is not speaking on all of the human race, alright, which is the bride, which we know the bride is the bride of Christ, which you gotta be in the right way, following the right path, purifying yourself, repenting, and being in alignment with the truth and spiritual things, is sufficiently altered to receive the characteristics of the higher creation. Alright? Do you see how Gentiles alter the scripture? It's not speaking on the whole human race. It's only speaking on those who have been set apart to this point. Alright? That's going to be sufficiently altered to receive the characteristics of the higher creation. Alright? The bridegroom, which is the characteristics of your brother Yahshua, of your brother Asa, of your brother Enoch. Alright? That higher self. Alright, again, verse 22. This transition into new astronomical and consciousness spaces is known as a space-time overlap. Now let's precept, page 127. Starting at verse 54. The space-time overlap is the intersecting of different objectified orderings of galactic time within the same consciousness time zone, in such a way that the ionization of our race or man as the bride is sufficiently altered to receive the characteristics of the higher self. At the onset of the overlap, we will gradually experience a buildup of new visual vibratory forms, and we will begin to accept spiritual knowledge, which will allow us to unfold into new vibrations while still discriminating between the various levels of intelligence which will appear. Know that the forces of light will not allow the spiritual seed to perish during this time. Know that the forces of light will not allow the spiritual seed to perish during this time, for we share with them the same Father. 58. During the time of the space-time overlap, the children of light will collectively put on new garments of light as they ascend through the spheres and through the thresholds of the other worlds of creation. All right? And like we said, the Gentiles making people believe that this all people and that they don't have to believe in the Most High and that just the human race is going to be changed. No, that's a lie. That's Gentile teachings. All right? And the Most High told us start listening to Gentiles and the Negroes that teach and preach just like the Gentiles. The same thing. All right? No. Page 210. Let's keep precepting. Page 210. Starting at verse 32. If a global network of spiritual humanity unites to draw upon these energies and focus them with a unified purpose towards the marriage of a consciousness evolution to a scientific evolution, the world will be one planetary mind. The world will be one planetary mind. That's Zion. The one people, the one mind, the one consciousness that will fuse with other planetary worlds and understand how our planetary mind is one of many thinking membranes between evolutionary star systems. Our planetary mind will be speeded up as an electromagnetic computer as we move into an electromagnetic null zone. During this period of the next 30 years, the planetary mind will enter a dimension of time-space beyond conventional time-space and be transfigured by all of other life forms that make up our many in one universe. During the present space-time overlap, there will be the passing of one energy universe within another as our planetary mind crosses the present electromagnetic density threshold and is raised to the next electromagnetic orbit of the universal mind. At this point, we as sons of man become the sons of light and transplant our consciousness light into other regions of our local universe. All right? So he's seeing how it's all tying together. Back to page 133, verse 29. However, the pillar of light acts as a light covering which prevents the consciousness form, which is to continue, from discorporating during the transition. All right? However, the pillar of light, all right? We remember we just read the definition of the pillar of light. I'm gonna throw it back on the screen right quick so that we can make this make sense. All right? So we won't lose nobody. The pillar of light, all right, which is the wavelength for projection and deliverance of the offspring of the deity from on high. The pillar of light acts as a light covering which prevents the consciousness forms, the life forms, which are to continue from discorporating during the transition. The transition into that space-time overlap as we go through that electromagnetic null zone. Without this garment of light, without that pillar of light being a covering, without this garment of light, the image frequency, meaning man, behind the genetic code, would be destroyed. Without this garment of light, the image frequency behind the genetic code would be destroyed. If your vibration and your frequency is not in alignment as we going through this, you're going to be sent off. All right? And like it said, in the book of Psalms, chapter 91. Psalms, chapter 91, starting at verse 7. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come near thee. Only with thy eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Only with thy eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come near thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels, the brotherhood that we just read about, the pillar of light, charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. To keep thee in all thy ways. 30. This transit is begun through teleshift light fields modulating the consciousness time zones wherein ascension begins to take place. Let's get the definition of teleshift. Teleshift light fields. A field of light protection which is induced so that the mind can adapt to new frequencies of light within the light continuum. All right, again, a field of light protection which is induced so that the mind can adapt to new frequencies of light within the continuum of light. And shifting species growth from sequence to sequence, the higher intelligence uses light fields as a necessary component to protect the species. Alright, so again, this transition is begun through teleshift light fields, modulating the consciousness time zones wherein ascension begins to take place. This means while we go into an electromagnetic null zone, unless we are balanced by teleshift light fields, our mind as an electromagnetic computer would not adapt to the new frequency of light and would be destroyed. All right? And this is the danger of the carnal mind. The carnal mind is not going to be able to continue. It's not going to be able to handle the frequencies that's coming. And they are not going to have the protection of the angels, the entities, the brotherhood. All right? They're not going to be coded from on high to be able to continue on the journey. 33. One has to go into a weak magnetic zone to allow for complete reorientation from without. One has to go into a weak magnetic zone. All right, and this talking about the electromagnetic null, meaning void, the electromagnetic null zone. All right, that we're going into. One has to go into a weak magnetic zone to allow for complete reorientation from without, meaning the reorientation of the outer image, the body. Here, linkages are forged which allow the body, which in the previous verse it said to allow for complete reorientation from without, because the brotherhood reorientates us from within, but from without is the weak magnetic zone. Here, linkages are forged which allow the body to inherit the light kingdom, which is to work with certain geomagnetic parameters on the lower planes of creation. However, light cannot exit the geomagnetic parameter until the field is weakened and reoriented. Once the proper linkages have been completed with the human system, through harmonic intensities of spin coordination, the alignment with the new light zone can take place through inner magnetohydrodynamic fields. Let's get the definition. Whole lot of science in this lesson right here. Whole lot of science. Let's get the definition. Magnetohydrodynamic, relating to energy forces arising from the motion of electrically conducting media in the presence of electric and magnetic fields. The second definition is more so what we're looking for. Free energy in space, used by the higher evolution, the entities, or the brotherhood to provide an additional energy support. There are key areas in space and on Earth for the MHD, or the magnetohydrodynamic alignments, which are used by the brotherhood of light. Example, the tackling making area in Tibet, in the Bermuda Triangle area. Alright, we're gonna read about the Bermuda Triangle in a second, alright? Because you always hear about how it's some weird things that go on in the Bermuda Triangle, because that's one of the time warp areas. Alright, so again, verse 35. Once the proper linkages have been completed with the human system, through harmonic intensities of spin coordination, the alignment with the new light zone can take place through magnetohydrodynamic fields modulating the geophysical time warp areas of the lower structure into new time zones by means of a Leusch pillar of light. In other words, our planetary field connects with the higher evolutionary arrangement through the geophysical time warp openings. Through the time warp openings. Let's get the definition of time warp before we continue. We're about to read about it. Time warp, space-time warps. Within the galaxy, the coordinates of electrical and magnetic grids connected with electromagnetic geometries around the Earth and natural time warp areas on the surface of the planet. A universal space-filling lattice. Natural time warps. On meteorological and geological maps, points of space anomalies, forming a dodecahedral energy map of the Earth. A magnetic grid system on the planet, similar to the major acupuncture points of the human body. Architectural vortices which interface with the celestial influences so as to produce different levels of magnetic phenomena. Points at which planetary energy currents affect not only the magnetic currents of the Earth's surface, but energy layers of the Earth deep below. Alright, and let's get the definition of artificial time warp zones. Unusual space-time anomalies created by the brotherhoods of light or higher intelligence for operations within the structure of the planet. A non-natural typology for an opening or a time tunnel to specific areas where an artificial environment is sustained. Now let's go to page 43. Page 43. Alright. What we doing right here is setting it up for the next lesson. Alright. Page 43, starting at verse 3. In order to understand what time warp areas represent, we have to understand the time warp fields. We have to understand the time warp fields as a type of energy pyramid. Alright? As a type of energy pyramid. And let's get the definition. Pyramid of light. Energy pyramid. A pyramid of light. The central model used in connecting the biomagnetic network of the body, the planetary body, and the interplanetary body of the cosmos with higher evolutionary orders. The pyramid of light is connected with a specific throne center for the filtering of divine wisdom. Alright, the first definition, that's the one we're looking for here. The model used in connecting the biomagnetic network of the body, the planetary body, and the interplanetary body of the cosmos with higher evolutionary orders. And that's what these time warp fields do. Verse 3 again, in order to understand what time warp areas represent, we have to understand the time warp fields as a type of energy pyramid. Verse 5. What is not shown on mappings of the vortex jar of time warp zones is their connection with the stars and the ancient astrophysical stations of light upon the earth. The ancient astrophysical stations of light upon the earth. Alright, let's get the definition of vortex jar. Vortex jar. Cha-cha. Alright, a vortex jar. Time warp programming area for space brotherhoods. A region of space-time matter which does not correspond to the physics of the 3D realm and set functions of physical reality. Alright, so again, what is not shown on mappings of the vortex jar of time warp zones is their connection with the stars and ancient astrophysical stations of light upon the earth. Alright, we're gonna get a picture of the time warp zones. Alright, look right here. It's 12 points. Here go the 12 major artificial time warp areas used by the Brotherhood. And then below, you have the major natural time warp areas used by the Brotherhood. And you see right there, the Bermuda Triangle is one of them points lingering off from the East Coast. The Bermuda Triangle is a natural time warp area. So when you heard about them projects that they was running in the Army back in the day, the Philadelphia experiment and all them different things, there's truth in all of these things that they try to hide and cover up. And by them having our teachings and hiding them from us for so long, they were able to just tell us these things weren't true. This is part of us getting put asleep. We knew all these things at one time. Alright? And now we are being reawakened to the truth of it. But our brothers and sisters who are stuck with the carnal mind and stuck on the abomination of desolation and them fallen teachings, they aren't being truly awakened at this time. They still spiritually asleep. All the information is not the awakening. Information is just the process that's used to initiate the spiritual awakening, which is the true awakening. All right, the remembering of everything that was took from us before we got shut down. Verse 8. we see that the Earth is controlled by great geomagnetic energy spokes, and that each energy spoke has within it 12 energy spokes, all interconnected as certain parts of the Earth's star field. All right, and if you look at it, look at it again, the time warp areas. This also shows you how the Earth is not a globe, because this is the way that it's actually laid out. All right, there's an ice wall that goes around where each of these points are at. And the Gentiles then showed us this on numerous movies about the ice wall. But this is the way that the lower heavens sit. All right, there's no such thing as a globe where you underneath the bottom of the globe. Verse 11, each one of the 12 main lattice areas is controlled by a high frequency geophysical pyramid. Each one of the 12 main lattice areas, each one of these high energy areas is controlled by a high frequency geophysical pyramid. Geo means earth. A physical pyramid on the earth. All right. That's what the use of some of these big pyramids was for. All right, let's keep going. What appears as the physical structure of these time warp areas exists in reality as a twin force of matter and antimatter, which creates a mirror-like image, which can be used to alter physical reality to a much higher reality of universal intelligence. 13. The Brotherhood of Light uses these 12 grids or vortex jars to enable them to come into the Earth's biosphere and build great civilizations to help the consciousness of man understand his divine origin. All right? And this is speaking on how in the past the Brotherhood was able to come onto the Earth. Like when we hear about the Anunnaki coming onto the Earth. Yeah, all that stuff was true. When you heard about the gods that walk with man, that's true. On the shows like Ancient Aliens, when you see all them pictures, them great big pictures carved in the stone, and then people say that them was the gods that came and all that. Yeah, it was gods that came. They came advancing the people, just like on the movie Eternals. They came. And now, at the end of time, they coming again. So they came in the past, and they're coming back again. Page 47, verse 31. The higher intelligence coming from a galactic light threshold needs only to draw lines between given vortex jars, light portals on the Earth, and moving magnetic vortices in the airstreams in order to set in motion all of the spectrum controls necessary to establish their coordinates. Their vehicles establish molecular triangular coordinate patterns in the air, as well as on the Earth, which permits them to come into the Earth's field of intelligence. 36. For example, the higher intelligence is coming into the ocean through the Pyramid 5 energy configuration of the Bermuda Triangle. The higher intelligence is coming into the ocean through the Bermuda Triangle and is making use of the ocean shelf, which is there from the previous Atlantean age, preparing America to become the new Atlantis. These previous Atlantean fields of crystalline energy are being reactivated. The previous Atlantean fields of energy are being reactivated as centers of energy focus on the planet, which will be used once the Earth's inner core of neutral matter has been heaved up. Page 134, verse 45. This key gives the macro and micro models as above, so below. This key gives the macro and micro models interpenetrating themselves simultaneously, meaning they're coming together. As above, those on the other side of the veil is connecting with those of us on this side of the veil. All right, we're coming together. The dimensions are combining. The multiverses are coming together. The spiraling up through the pillar of light allows for the species to recharge itself. The spiraling down of anything that is not protected in the light will be lost and going through the space singularity. In this process, the dissipated energy is only lost to the higher planes. All right, and this going into what we read at the end of the last lesson. The spirits that are the carnal beings and those that just were the 2/3 that are to be recycled, that's going into the recycle bin. Nah, they gonna get another chance. They just not gonna be able to elevate unto the higher heavens. All right, because they haven't spiritualized their consciousness yet, so they can't be used on that plane of existence. They have to remain on a carnal field of existence. All right, in this process, the dissipated energy, the lower self, the lower energy, is only lost to the higher planes. For it is recycled and revised to keep life refined and going on within the infinite way. All right, so they just recycle on a new Earth station that's going through the time of probation. And this transformation, man, spiritual man, must sacrifice his I of individuality for the collective I am to ascend to God's kingdom and surrender to the work of the Father first above all else. Thus, our luminous consciousness, our I am, our starseed, attaches itself to the higher intelligence on the other side of the river of crystal, on the other side of the galactic tree of life. This projected focus of light is the pillar of light which connects our life with life on the other side of the river of crystal. The pillar of light is a sanctifying light governing and protecting the actions of spiritual decision under the most crucial circumstances. It is used for the redemption of a planet by the Adonai Sabaoth. The people of God become one with the pillar of light which rests over their tabernacle on the journey into the next creative level of intelligence. Alright? So that's the spiritual science of what's going on right now and how the things above are tying into what's going on below. Alright? The upper heavens combining with the lower heavens to transform this kingdom. I know it was a lot of science, but hey, those of you that got the keys, review some of the terms so that we can keep growing and elevating. Alright? Peace.